Talk me through, why do you feel we should rethink happiness?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. Happiness is really important to me because I found in my journey as a coach and just in my own personal life that happy people tend to be better neighbors, better partners, better citizens. When people are coming from a place of authentic happiness, they seem to make better choices and live better lives. And so I feel I have a vested interest in helping people be more happy. I think you just end up creating a happier society, tends to be a better society. And I also find that the reason to rethink it is a lot of people get off track. I've had people come to me for coaching and they'll say, I've have all these achievements. I've been to university. I've got a family. Maybe they have a family or don't, or but they've definitely had this sequence of things that they've done, whether it's career or other milestones. And then they say, I've done all these things and I'm still not happy, because what they've done is this box checking exercise that, society says, if you do all these things, then you'll eventually reach happiness. And that's why I encourage people to define happiness for themselves, because it's a very personal thing. What is authentic happiness for you is different than for someone else. There are some commonalities there, but those are kind of the two things. I find there's a lot of people out there looking for something and being very disappointed because they've kind of followed the wrong guidance or not listened to their own inner signals. And I think we live in a time where this is a really important topic, because if you look at whether it's Europe or North America, levels of depression and anxiety are extremely high, especially post-COVID. And so that's why I think it's a more important topic than ever.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree with you more. Why do you feel we've gone off tracks? I'm going to say the words "go off track," but what I feel like a lot of us get caught up. I've certainly been there, which is chasing success, chasing the thing, chasing the big house, the car, the family. And one of my biggest challenging points was when I should have been great, should have been really happy, but I really wasn't. So, and that's where I struggled the most with sort of anxiety and depression. And I think you've kind of had those challenges. What is it in society that is making us face the thing? Like, is that just ingrained in growth or how we are as a society? What's making us face, I'm going to say the wrong things, but I don't know if that's even the right description.
Yeah, there's a number of points to cover there. I think we do have this this built-in desire for growth, but the type of growth we often pursue is the kind that's external. The kind that we can show off to our friends, whether it's a bigger bank account, whether for some people it's having slept with more partners, or having the better title and in front of our name or whatever. But those are all external factors, and really the kinds of things that make us grow, like experience, like I think this is why having children is so satisfying and rewarding. It's somewhere where we have a lot to give, but also having observed a lot of parents, I think kids teach us a lot more than we teach them on occasion. So I think that is part of it. And I think the other part is we are looking for external solutions to internal problems. So a lot of our suffering, I mean, if you look at ancient wisdom and the different philosophies, especially in Buddhism, they talk about suffering. We create our own suffering by wrong thinking. I don't believe in wrong thinking, but by thinking that's not supporting our happiness. And so the way I define happiness is, a lot of people think it's this, it's something pleasurable. They think it's a certain point in their life where everything's, there are no more problems. But really, for me, happiness, I look at it as this kind of a feedback. Life is this feedback loop that keeps kind of letting us know that our actions and our choices, or the way we're seeing the world, is kind of in alignment with our values and needs. And so the feedback, or in terms of happiness as the feedback or unhappiness, when it, in extreme cases, depression, is telling us, those are our inner signals saying, that the choices you're making are not in alignment with what you really want and need. And that's why I talk about authentic happiness. It's not these moments of, well, I had a great vacation or had a great night out with my friends. That can be fine too. But we have people living these lives that are where we're living for the peaks, and then everything else in between kind of is like filler. And that's such a, really not making the most of your potential for joy and happiness in your life, because every moment in every day has an opportunity for happiness. And it comes down to how we are choosing to live and how we're choosing to see the world. Because sometimes it's just the way we're seeing things is making us unhappy, and other times it's the choices we're making and the type of life that we're living.
So interesting. I love this conversation already. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. As you were discussing that, lots of different ways I can take the conversation, but I'm thinking about my 4-year-old. No one has to tell my 4-year-old to be happy. He wakes up, he is so excited. He'll come down the stairs, "Daddy, I've got pockets." And I'm like, "Have you got pockets?" "I've got pockets. We've got pockets." And we celebrate. I never knew when I became a parent, I would celebrate having pockets, right? But what I'm sharing is that he is excited for life. Like, we'll go out for a walk, he'll look up, there's a plane, there's a train, there's a this, there's a that. And something must happen as we get older, where we must lose kind of that excitement for life. Because at the moment, he's got it in abundance. What do you think it is that's happening as we get older, as we come out of that childlike state and we kind of move into those adolescent years? What's changed? What's happening for us there?
Well, there are a number of things. The longer we're, the longer we're on this earth and living our life, the more habits we've accumulated over time, the more habits in terms of behavior and in terms of thinking. We've established a number of beliefs, and we often see the world through the filter of our beliefs. So it's a way of seeing the world. And through that, our curiosity diminishes, our sense of awe. We become accustomed to things, something new for a 4-year-old. That seems so incredible is just, we overlook a lot of things. And this is where I go back to kids teach us a lot. I think children and animals teach us to be in the moment and to really relish this, all the opportunities in each moment for joy or wonder or, exploration. And I think that's something that kids really have in them. And so part of the work that I do with people in coaching is I work on their beliefs and their thinking habits, because I found, I had for a lot of my early life had issues with depression. And I found one of the biggest things I was able to do to change that was to change, recognizing, first of all, that I could change my beliefs, and really sorting through and recognizing the beliefs that had utility, that were supportive, and also recognizing the habitual ways of thinking and, practices like meditation, which helped me become the observer of my thoughts and recognize that a lot of times my thoughts are undermining me. And a lot of times I'm thinking the same thoughts over and over. So they're this habit that I've accumulated. So I think those are the things that we have accumulated, over a lifetime that kids are not yet burdened with. And I think that's the big difference.
And I completely agree. It's so interesting hearing you talk about it, because somewhere along the lines we start to have beliefs, there are habits, there are routines that just naturally start to happen. And I think I was listening to Marissa Peer recently talking about that, some of those inner beliefs that you start to adopt as a child. I think some of that led into my depression and low self-esteem later on. And so can you talk to that? Like, what do you think is happening there? So these beliefs, so I didn't even realize I had like self-beliefs or self-limiting beliefs, I think is probably the thing. I never didn't even realize I had those. So what's going on there? How are they getting instilled in us without us even realizing?
I guess before I answer that question, because I have a very clear strategy and philosophy about helping people change their beliefs, and that looks at where those beliefs come from. But one of the models we often use in coaching and also in psychology is the iceberg model. So the iceberg has basically the part that's visible above the surface is only a small fraction of the whole iceberg. And the same goes for the psyche, the personality. You basically have, we think we're often operating based on the thoughts that we're aware of, and the sort of intentions that we have, present in our mind at any given moment. And yet, what we're really operating from are the things that are below the surface, which are our beliefs, our biases, our emotions, our experiences, the stories we're telling ourselves. All those things are operating on an unconscious level. And so once we've internalized a belief, it starts to sit there in the background and operate in us and influence the way that we see the world and the choices that we make. So we'll have our beliefs that lead to a certain strategy. So our beliefs will be based on, maybe some experience that we've had, or at least the perception of those events. That belief will form and create a strategy for us. And that strategy sometimes will help us in the short term, but then when we get to a different phase in our life, we're still using that strategy, even though it's no longer working for us. So I just to sort of, in very basic terms, help people understand, what's happening below the surface and below our level of awareness. But in terms of our beliefs, I look at three ways that beliefs develop. So our experience. So, we'll have an experience, and we will interpret it in a particular way, and that will lead us to believe something about ourselves, about the world, or our place in it. There is our environment. So that'll be the media, the people we have around us. So we have a certain environment as we're growing up as kids. As we get older, we'll have our peer group. As we become adults, we have our colleagues, will have the media that we watch and listen to. And I think more than ever, we're becoming aware of these kind of bubbles that are forming because people are getting a lot of this confirmation of their own beliefs, because through social media, we're surrounded by very similar thinkers. And that's why diversity of thought, I think, is so important. And then finally, the third thing that I look at is habitual thinking. And so you'll find that you have one thought and you'll attract more similar thoughts to it. That's the way your brain is networked. And so what happens is as your neurons fire, the more they do, the stronger that bond in your brain, and the more that stream of thought or that way of thinking entrenches itself. And so that becomes a habit. And so I explain it to people, like, if you're wanting to change that, it's like you're walking through the forest on a path, but you want to walk a different direction. First, it's pretty hard. You got to go through, trample through the bushes. Eventually you'll create a new path and the old one will grow over. And the same sort of process happens in your brain. You have to practice new ways of thinking. And so those are the three areas: experience, environment, and habitual thinking. And those are the things that I address to help people change. And, with experience, I use a simple example. Like, if you have a fear of public speaking, maybe you were ridiculed at some point in your youth because of things that you said, or you had one bad experience. And so just having new experiences can help you change that belief. So, start speaking in front of a small group, become competent in a subject matter that you can talk on, and then speak in front of larger and larger groups. And eventually that fear of public speaking will subside. So that's having a new experience. For some people, changing your environment can be as simple as, start cutting out how much media you consume. When I left Canada, I backpacked for 6 months, and I almost had no television. And I realized that I felt a lot better not seeing the news on a daily basis. So it's not to say you shouldn't be informed and you should stick your head in the sand, but there's overconsumption. And then the way I help people work with habitual ways of thinking is I use affirmations. And affirmations have kind of a negative connotation. It's not just this positive thinking and just telling yourself good things in front of the mirror. I really look to identify the kind of beliefs or chronic ways of thinking that are bothering people, and then we create statements together that counter those. And every time those thoughts come up, that's when you say your affirmation, and that then helps. That whole path through the forest, that really helps you walk that new path and help the other one grow over. So those are the three areas. Bit of a long-winded explanation, but that's the way I like to work.
So it's really great, and I appreciate you sharing that. So I've been writing these down, so I've been trying to get a bit more. So maybe we should dive into each one in a bit more detail, because you talked about, we'll start with experience, then we go to environment and habitual thinking. With experience, you're also talking about create change, you've got an experience, something that's happened, and then almost to create change, I wrote down the word evidence. You need to create a level of evidence that you can do the thing or whatever, whether it's public speaking or whatever it is, that you can start slowly going on that journey. Maybe you can speak to that. So if someone's struggling or they're looking for change today, and the experience that they've had so far isn't a suitable one, or they've got to do something that they've got to go and create some change. What's the best things that they can go and do?
Yeah, so evidence is a great one, because sometimes I will ask people, who are your role models? Who are the people that you look up to? And you will, you can then look at what are the things that the attributes that they have that you admire, and what would you need to have in your life in order to confirm that you are as good, or you are on your way to being there. So if you aspire to be someone who makes a lot of money and makes good, what is it that you need to do, or what kind of experiences do you need to have? What kind of feedback do you need from life that will show you that you have the ability to do the same? Because a lot of times we will have negative experiences. Maybe a parent will have lost their job, and there's a lot of fear around money. And then, so what kind of experiences do you need to have in order to have confidence that you are worthy, that you have the ability and the knowledge, and that you as well. We live in a society where anybody with the right initiative and skill set can become wealthy, sort of thing. What are those are the things I look at in terms of what evidence do you need in order to change that belief, right? So that's why I talk about having a new experience. So does that make sense to you?
It does. Yeah, I really like it. I think because that's something that I've kind of, whenever I've tried to look at change in my life, I've tried to do a really, if we think about James Clear's, I forgot the name of the book now because I haven't slept last night. with baby. What's James Clear's book called?
I've listened to him speak, but I'm not sure which book that you're referring to.
I talk about this book all the time. It's
yeah.
It's hilarious when you're struggling on sleep, but what you can't remember.
I'm looking at myself too, and I'm just trying to. I can't pick it out. But yeah, I know who you're talking about.
All right, so cool. I'll send it in the notes. I always talk about this stuff. Essentially, what James Clear is talking about is doing tiny, almost ridiculous micro steps to get somewhere. So instead of going to the gym, for example,
Atomic Habits.
There we are. Atomic Habits.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Instead of just saying, right, I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week, he would say, don't do that, because you're more hugely likely to fail. He said, start off with something really simple. Today, we're going to agree that if you're going to go to the gym, we're not going to do that. Instead, you're going to put on your trainers today. And tomorrow, you're going to put on your trainers, you're going to go outside and walk for 1 minute. The next day, you're going to walk 2 minutes, next day. And so by the end of the month, you're going to go outside, you put your trainers on, I want you to go out walking and build up to an hour. It's tiny, tiny little increments, which are almost so ridiculous. You then naturally, the psychology is you then did go and do more. So walking for 1 minute, you'll think, well, I'm outside and it's nice now. I can go walk for 10 or 15 minutes. But 2 days ago, you couldn't do that. So I love the creating evidence like that based on almost tiny, ridiculous micro steps. That's exactly the best way I think about that experience piece.
Yeah, I think having those small wins that help you convince yourself that you're ready for the next step, and so on, because their perception is a big piece of that. I don't know if you've in North America in sports, they talk about sophomore syndrome, and it's this athletes that go into university, they will excel in their first year of university. They'll be really good, and then in their sophomore year, their second year, they'll feel like they're actually getting worse. Because their growth curve was so intense that first year, and then it slows down. They're actually still improving, but the rate of growth has decreased. So their perception of their ability diminishes through that experience, and so it really helps have contrast and the ability to step back and evaluate yourself honestly. But to talk back to your point about the Atomic Habits, there's a really great sociologist, B.J. Fogg, who who also, he was a little bit before James Clear, and he was talking also about these tiny habits. And so his approach was that in order to change something, you need a trigger. So he looks at it as this matrix where your level of motivation and the level of difficulty. So if there's something that you're really motivated to do, you're able to tackle something that is more difficult. But if there's something that you have low motivation, it needs to be less difficult in order to allow yourself to initiate and take the first step. And so he would break things down and one of the examples he gives, in order to get a little fitter, he started to do push-ups, and he used a trigger. He used something that he did on a daily basis. So every time he went to the washroom, he did a couple of push-ups first, and he started with 2 or 3, got up to 10, and eventually through his visits to the bathroom, he basically was doing from memory, I think he was doing 100 push-ups a day all of a sudden by taking these small steps. And first you start, and they become easy. And this is where the whole level of difficulty changes over time. The more you do something, the easier it becomes, and the more you can do of it, right? So, it's, if you can only do 5 reps of something, you do it enough times, you'll be able to do 10 or 20 and so on. And so the difficulty reduces. And then through that whole process, and you're starting to see results, your motivation also increases. So it's this whole process of finding the right triggers to keep you until the habit is ingrained. And by starting, you make sure that you have the correct level of motivation and difficulty in balance. So I think that's another thing that really helps you get good results.
Why do you, just on the last thing on experience, you might have a perspective on this. So if you look across social media, you look at some like Gary Vee, and a lot of the narrative is around just start. So what's the gap there? Like what's the challenge, and why is there so many social media influencers talking about just start? Because it seems like there must be a whole bunch of people that they have these dreams, or they have these goals, things that they want to do, but they're not taking the first step. Hence the reason people like Gary Vee have got, many millions of followers, because of that narrative. So what's happening in the psychology there? Why won't people just get started and do the thing?
Yeah, it's great for these really successful, very motivated, driven people to say just start. For some people that works, but there's actually a guy I've been listening to the last few months who I find really great. He goes by Dr. K, and I think his site is Healthy Gamer, and so he actually helps people who have addictions to video games and stuff like that. But he's actually a trained psychiatrist. But he talks about just get started is not the right thing. You've got to get yourself into the right state, right? So if you are not in the right mental, physical state in order to in order to be successful at something, if you try, you will fail if you're in the wrong state, right? If you're really having to just push through this wall to try and get started, and then you give up after 5 minutes, that you're creating negative experiences, not positive ones, right? So a big piece is making sure that you're in the right state. And so I'm not saying, well, wait until you feel like it. You need to work at it. So there are lots of things you can do. You can have, morning routines, rituals. Look, I people think I'm crazy, but I have cold showers, in the morning. And so whatever it is that you need to do in the morning to get yourself in the right state, whether it's spend some time with your pet or your kids to, get you grounded, whether it's going for a walk, spending time in nature, it's getting yourself in the right state. And when you're in the right state, then just do it, right? So it's kind of a 2-step method.
That sounds great. Thank you. All right. So that was experience. Now we're going to go into environment. So maybe we can break that down. So one of the examples you were giving was about one stage you disassociated so much from the news. I did something very similar as well, because I just found the news on TV was just always negative. And I just thought, I don't need these negative thoughts coming into me. Like there's no benefit to me, because something's happening obviously it's good to be informed, but something's happening miles away about something I have got no interest in whatsoever. And it's the Mark Manson book about, suddenly the art of not giving an FUCK about something.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't need to give any thoughts about that, right? Because it's nothing to do with me. And I really, so when you mentioned about the news, that really resonated with me. So maybe you can have a little, can you give a bit of a summary about how someone can look at their environment and think about how they can improve their environment for their benefit, for their well-being?
Absolutely. I think you can look at the utility of the activities that you spend your time on. You can look at the value of the kind of inputs that you're getting. Sometimes if we surround ourselves with people that complain a lot, maybe they're family. And I'm not saying you should disown your family, but you can manage the amount of time that you spend with them, right? So, you can love your mom, but know that too much of time with her can be a burden for you mentally. So it can be the people in your life. It can be, working in a job environment where it's really negative. And, I know that's it's not easy to maybe you're in a situation where it's not easy to find another job, but that should maybe be your first priority. If you work in an environment that's super negative, that is highly, maybe you're not a super competitive person, you're more creative and you're working in a really competitive space, maybe that's a signal to make a shift and at least make it a goal for yourself. But I think the easiest thing to do is as you say, the inputs that you have. So we get very, people talk about doom scrolling. They look at all the bad news on their social media feed, and you can create boundaries for yourself where you say, I am only going to look at social media for X number of hours or minutes per day, however you want to ration it, and then just even test it out for a week and see how much better you feel if you're not looking at all these negative things. And you can actually, this is where mindfulness is really important, because we kind of go on these things without a thought, but if we take a moment to take a breath, and I don't know if you're familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh. He passed away just not that long ago, but he was a Buddhist monk that brought mindfulness to the West, and really simple things. But he has this very simple, process that, pause, breathe, smile, right? And so every time you recognize, I've gotten off track, or I've let myself be pulled away to this negative thing, you can smile to yourself and go, okay, I'll do it next time. And so as you're being confronted with all these negative impulses, if you pause, reflect on how's this making me feel, and use that as an indication of, do I want to have more or less of this in my life, right? And so if you've just spent an hour scrolling through your social media, how good do I feel? Well, I don't feel great. And so maybe it's something simple like turning off the notifications on your phone so you don't hear them, right? We're prompted to take action involuntarily, and it's become a habitual practice. So anything that you recognize doesn't make you feel good, and it's all about a balance, because I think sometimes people need to get uncomfortable to help them change. But I'm talking about in terms of something that doesn't have any utility, and that still that kind of affects you in a negative way, and also makes you spend your time in a way that is not fulfilling, not inspiring, not getting you towards your goals, right? So those are some of the things you can look for in terms of how you're spending your time and what kind of input you're allowing into your psyche.
I think about this a lot. I think it's about taking control and almost taking responsibility for the situation. So social media, you can choose who you follow, who you don't follow. And obviously everything on social media is an algorithm. So therefore, if you like something, you're going to get more of the thing. So you can take control of it, and you can choose to put the phone down. You can choose to turn off the notifications, which is something I do as well. I have no notifications on my phone. I don't like it. So I think I'm having a good day. I don't need to be notified of anything. It's better. My life has been so much happier since I disassociated more, and I just focused on trying to be more present, trying to be present with the family or at work, or whatever, and be present. I watched a great speech. Workplace psychologist came in and he just said, wherever you are, be there. And he had a great speech for about an hour or so, and he's really talking about just being present in the moment and not having the phone, not having this, not having Slack. And I really resonated into that. So I thought that was good. So,
Yeah. Sorry, just on the control piece, I absolutely agree with you there. It'll just be something different for everyone. And
yeah.
sometimes people don't feel they have control over things, uh, uh, but they actually do, right? So you do have control over the people you let into your life or how much time they have with you. So for some people, the social media stuff's not an issue. For some people, it's just they have toxic relationships, right? Or they have just exposure to other negative things. And I think that, or they, like maybe they live in a neighborhood where there's constantly, and so maybe your top priority needs to be to relocate somewhere where you're not, one of the big ways they changed the whole crime situation in New York was they when there was graffiti, they painted over it. When there was a broken window, they repaired it right away. So the sort of standard was clean, well-maintained buildings and environment. So they changed the environment and changed people's attitude towards things. They didn't tolerate littering and all these different things. And so that's why, there's so many different factors to it. But I agree with you. Taking control is a big part of it, and taking a responsibility, because recognizing that you have the power to change, right? If you say, a lot of people feel like a victim of their circumstances, and if you identify as a victim, you will be powerless, right? A victim, by its definition, is not someone who's empowered. And so maybe it's just getting into a different mindset about who you are and what level of power that you have.
Yeah, so I feel like that's where if people feel powerless and they feel like there's no hope, I feel like that's the difficult. That's how I felt for a long time. Certainly in my work life. I just thought, where is this going? There's no hope. It's such a long road to get somewhere better as in a toxic work environment. So it's really interesting, kind of the way you're saying. Obviously, that social media is one thing, work's another. The environment you're talking about in New York. But I think ultimately people need to have some level of hope that it can get better.
Yes.
For you to be able to take responsibility for there to be change. And I think that's, you've made a really important point there.
Yeah. Even culture. I think culture, the culture you live in, whether it's your ethnic culture in your neighborhood or whether it's the culture of the country you're living in. I know that's not easy for people to change, but recognizing what elements of that support you, if there's something that's affecting your health negatively, but you have this culture of eating a certain way, and that's another thing that ties to our psychology that we know more than ever is things like lifestyle, diet, exercise affect depression, anxiety, all kinds of mental health issues. So yeah, culture is another one. Anyway, don't want to digress onto another one.
Well, let's talk about culture just a little bit, because
Okay.
we'll connect it to the workplace. So I think this is an interesting scenario. I've worked in my career in sales for 20 years, and some sales places that I've worked in, obviously high pressure environments, those sorts of things. One company I worked in, it started toxic and it only got worse. And another place I worked in it started great with culture and it only got better. And I spend a lot of time thinking about, because in the place where I define as toxic, which probably is unfair, but it was, but everyone was trying to make it better. Like there were everyone in the leadership team, we were all, how do we make this better? How does this better? But there were so many, I couldn't understand why we couldn't make it better, because there were so many people trying to do it. But in the culture where it was just, from the first day, everything it was just, it doesn't mean it wasn't hard and had to be gritty, you need to have resilience, all those sorts of things as well. But there was just a better well-being culture. We're all in this together. We're going to try and make this be successful. So when you're in these environments like this, everyone's trying to be successful. Why do you think sometimes it doesn't change, or the psychology of the workplace makes it difficult to change? Because my only outcome from this one was to leave eventually after 5 years and 2 or 3 years in depression because I couldn't fix it. It was like, okay, there's nothing else I can do there.
Yeah, and it's easy to feel hopeless when your efforts are not leading to the results you want. I have worked with leaders and with organizations to help facilitate culture change. And there's two ways to fundamentally change the culture in an organization, in a business, whatever. It's through leadership. And those will be very specific strategies on what kind of behaviors do we want, what kind of values are we going to focus on in our organization. So through leadership and leading by example, culture can change, and also in terms of what kind of behaviors are rewarded and encouraged and supported, what kind of behaviors, because culture really is the reflection of your culture is the behaviors that you can observe. And so, the way people communicate and interact with each other. And then the other thing that influences culture is this: you can have a viral effect. So, and that those are the influencers and the people that have that their example makes a difference within the workplace, and that is a lot to do with hiring practices, right? So HR can look at, is this person going to be a good cultural fit based on sort of their background and their attitude, and there are a number of different factors you can look at. So it's about getting the right people that will support, and it doesn't mean people are good or bad. It just means they have certain ways of thinking and certain behaviors that either facilitate good communication and teamwork and that sort of thing. Because some of the really successful leaders are, some of the really successful CEOs and business people are not necessarily good leaders. Like, someone will point to Elon Musk as a great leader, and I admire his innovation and his engineering prowess. But from a leadership perspective, he expects everyone to work to his level, and he's a very unique individual. And so I wouldn't say that's a great example of good leadership. Those are the things that will influence the culture of your organization. Is making sure your philosophy as a leader is really clear, making sure that the values that you want reflected in your organization are really clearly defined. I mean, people go through life and have never thought about what their core values are, right? And yet, that's one of the big reasons people are unhappy at work, is because the things they're having to do on a day-to-day basis are in conflict with, some or all of their values. And that's going to make people really unhappy. So, and then people can, what I've done before when we help people change their organizational culture, what would happen is they would, a lot of the people that were affecting the culture negatively just left on their own, or the last few stragglers had to be let go. And that in itself, getting the right people, helped create a better, more positive culture. And then the other piece, as I said, is hiring the people that will complement that have the right skill set, that have the right attitude. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's really interesting. So I think you're right. It comes back down to leadership, but values. I think values, crystal. And it needs to be more than just something that's written on the wall. It has to be. I often think about the parent-child analogy, which is my children, they'll copy what you do and the way you speak and how you speak. So, and I think that's also, that happens in the workplace based on leadership, and then the employees of the business, if you will, where they will copy behaviors. And if they see a bad behavior or they see a great behavior, they think, okay, this is the sort of place I'll either be positively reinforced or negatively reinforced in some respects. And, that kind of becomes just something that everyone feeds off. It's positive, it's great, it's this, it's that. And I think you're right. It absolutely is set by leadership. There's no question.
And this is the thing that I see often goes wrong in organizations that are trying to make those steps, is the people at the very top of the business in leadership, they will not be, they feel that, oh, well, that doesn't apply to me. These kind of rules and the way we've agreed to behave within the organization, that doesn't apply to me. I'm the exception. But you're the most important people, that the person, or you are the most important people in that role, where everybody's looking to you for, because leadership, a lot of people think that leadership and management's the same thing, but I love the way Seth Godin talks about, people get appointed to be managers, and managers, they manage processes and situations, but they don't manage people. You lead people, and leadership is this: here's where we're going, who's with me, right? And you have to get people to buy into you. And so if you are not living the values that you're espousing to, or you're telling people they have to live up to, then you're never going to get buy-in. People are not going to trust you.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. Also, Brilliant. That was so good. Thank you so much. Right, let's start with this last one because there's a few other things I really would love to chat to you about before we
Sure.
close the time. So you're talking about habitual thinking, and then you started to allude into affirmations. So just explain it to me a bit better, a bit more. So habitual thinking. So these might be. Are you talking about ruminating thoughts? Are they pathways? Which is I always think like this, so I'm never very good at that. Is it kind of low self-esteem with thinking about self-belief? Is it that kind of thing?
It can be a number of different things. So it can be the stuff that wakes you up in the middle of the night, the rumination, the worrisome thoughts. It can be situational. So whenever this happens, I immediately think, whether it's something you perceive as a mistake and oh, I'm no good at anything, or I always get this wrong. It could be in a social situation. They all probably think I'm stupid, or I'm not as good as any of these people. Some of the highest performers I've worked with have the biggest sense of imposter syndrome, right? So it'll be different for different people. So that's why I find this, this idea of saying affirmations and just telling yourself positive things. I don't really believe that works. What I think you need to do is, I'm a big proponent of being careful about the language that you use, because your unconscious is listening, and the things that you repeat to yourself, you'll internalize and you'll start to believe. And so when we recognize there are thoughts that are not supporting us and not beneficial to us, so there is legitimate critique you can have. You can have a sense of humility and recognize when there's an area that I want to change. But when it becomes I'm not worthy, or I can never do, when you're talking in absolutes, I never can do, I always get this wrong. That's a red flag for, okay, that's not a supportive belief, and that's something that I'd like to change. And so it can be simple as, if we look at something like, I don't know, is there a thought that comes up for you all the time that you find undermines you? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's all right. I have a think about it. I think I definitely have an inner critic.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's more of a low mood depressive. It's more like a feeling. The negative ruminating thoughts, I think about work a lot. I ruminate over so I might ruminate over a business problem too much.
Okay.
So they're not so much about me. So, for example, in the last couple of examples, I'll be thinking constantly about the business problem that we're focused on, like the cultural problem in my previous business, which I just didn't fix. And it caused me massive problems, anxiety, panic attacks, really low mood and depression. And sometimes I think about business problems that we're faced with today, and I can't not think about it. So I have to practice particular self-care routines, gym, exercise, journaling, meditation. So
They're all great.
frees me from a lot of those things. But I say my inner critic is it's almost critical of others, but not others as in people, others as in the business, the process, this or that, and that can cause me problems.
Well, there's a good distinction to make between the inner critic and the inner judge. So the inner critic is very inward focused, self-criticism, whereas the inner judge is someone who judges outwardly and criticizes outwardly. And those are all different. I work very systemically, and you can they have those parts of your personality have different roles. I'm not a psychologist, but I learned I was trained by psychologists in my coaching practice. But if you go through your journaling and you recognize a theme in the language that you're using and the words that you're using, like I'll give you a really basic example. I used to have I had some bad experiences in the past financially, and then I was also in a relationship with someone who didn't have very good habits around money, and I was the primary earner, and so I found myself worrying a lot about money and going, why is there never enough money? And I was always talking about things in terms of already confirming things as if this was going to go on forever. And so I started saying an affirmation for myself that confirmed that the opposite, as if it had already happened. So, for me, affirmations, it helps me when they rhyme. They don't need to, but I started saying to myself, my abundance is constantly increasing. My income grows every day. Today is my lucky day. I would like just something super easy that whenever I had negative thoughts about money, I'd start repeating this. I started feeling better. And, you can just say this is coincidence, but I was working in a job. I mean, this is a long time ago now, but I was working in a job and I got, I got a pay raise within 3 months of doing this work mentally. And then I got a discretionary bonus, and then I got promoted and got another pay raise. And this all happened within a 9-month period. And, from this period where I was, really frustrated with my level of income and also my level of spending, and at least it sorted one half of the equation. But I can list a number of things. I was really frustrated about when I first renovated the house I'm in 15 years ago. The contractors really, I didn't know enough, and they took advantage, and they really soaked me for a lot of cash. And then, I started telling myself an affirmation about, I learned from the, I can't even remember the wording now, but basically it had to do with me learning from these experiences in my life and, not repeating my mistakes. So the statements you make are, need to be easy to remember, and they need to be positive. So it can't be sort of, I'm not this or I'm not that. It needs to be I am, and saying it in a positive way. So if you have thoughts of I'm not worthy and I can never do anything right, you can start telling yourself, I know I add value, and I have potential to do more. So it's not saying something that you don't believe. It's getting wording that you believe, that's believable to you, and then scaling it up. As you believe one thing, then you can make it a little bit better, and then and so on. But what you basically do once you have that statement is every time those negative thoughts come, you start repeating that, and you'll find that as you repeat those as a mantra, those thoughts will dissipate. And when they come back, you repeat it again, and you rinse, repeat, and recycle, or whatever that saying is. And so that is the thing that will eventually, those will fade away completely, and you won't have them anymore, because you're no longer binding those neurons in your brain. That is that chain of neurons firing. That is that thought. And so
you're actually changing your brain's chemistry based on the repeatable systemic approach that you're having on a daily basis, whether there are thoughts, because that could be through meditations, through writing, or through speech. You're actually changing the neurons in your brain.
Yeah. So my layman's understanding of neurochemistry and neurobiology is, when you have a thought, it's a number of neurons that are firing. It's firing across a number of neurons. That basically is a thought. So it's a chemical process, but you have your neurons that basically bind together by always having the same thought over and over again. And so, much like the metaphor where I talked about walking through the forest, what you're basically doing is you're firing different neurons in the brain, and therefore it's making different connections, because your brain is this network. And that's why when you think a thought, you'll start bringing all these others, similar thoughts to it. If I said to you, don't think about your kitchen right now, what's the first thought that comes to your mind is probably your kitchen, right?
Kitchen.
Yeah. So by the same token, if you're training your brain to think about a certain sequence of thoughts, and you're drowning out this other sequence of thoughts, it will pretty soon you will wire these other neurons in your brain to think this new thought or this new statement. And it's worked on myself. It's worked for my clients. They'll have sort of a group. I'll have them identify a group of thoughts. So it doesn't always have to be the same thing going through your mind every time, but it can be all things that are all related. So we find one statement that kind of sums up that fear that they're talking about, and just like when you talk about ruminating about work and having fears about work, it'll either be, well, you've been successful in the past. So let's look at a statement that says, I know I'm successful because I've done it before, or something like that. Or where you're saying, previously you had a bad experience where you weren't able to be successful. You can make a statement that says, I've learned so much from my past experience. I'm now ready to create success in my life, or something like that. As long as you believe it, as long as you can believe that statement, then, it might not be I am this or I am that. It might be I have the potential or I know I can, right? Just something positive that's going to get you away from all the negative thinking and start you on a new trajectory.
It's like it's reframing. It's reframing the situation. So therefore, you're putting in more positive beliefs. One of the things, actually, now I've had a moment to think about it, one of the things that I certainly struggled with for a really long time, which was just, and I think this is very common, a lot of people will resonate with this, was just, I just don't feel enough. I don't feel enough. I don't feel good enough. And I've done therapy and a few different things like that. And what I now often do is when I might write down something very positive, but it's more about I believe in myself. I have confidence in myself. And it's not I don't feel enough, it's I feel great. And I just feel like every time I do that with those affirmations, I don't do it every day like I used to, but I feel like I built that belief to a point now where, I feel great. So I don't need someone else. And it's an interesting thing about that external validation, which you were talking about at the very beginning, because I think that goes all the way back down to, relationship with parents, those sorts of things, what the validation you're looking from your parents through to later life, which is, I don't need that validation anymore because I can give it to myself. I can be my own, I can be my own savior in some respects. It can come from internal, which is I feel great because I feel great. And,
Yeah. And
by
you,
writing, I'm proud of myself. And I know some of this can be a little bit, I don't know what you want to call it, but too much, maybe, I don't know. But
yeah,
it definitely, by going through the repeated process, the systematic process of reprogramming, it definitely makes a huge difference to how you feel about things.
exactly. And say, the process I'm talking about in changing habitual thoughts is a process of reprogramming, is essentially what it is. And the way you can define the language that's affecting you is journaling is a great one. So if you look through your journaling, you recognize the negative language you may have about a certain topic, that's where you start with in order to find the right statement for you. And the other great effect is that you will find your environment confirms your statement back to you because, psychologists talk about it in different ways, but they say that, at least 70% of our communication is nonverbal. And so we pick up cues from other people, from our body language, energetically, and so you'll find that your whole body posture, the way the way your mannerisms, the way you articulate your expressions, all of those things will be affected by those the affirmations or the change in attitude and state that you're doing through the affirmations you're doing for yourself. And then people will treat you differently. And so you'll see your environment will then naturally feed back to you that the shift that you've made is a positive one.
Yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. Now, before we close up, there's some bits I wanted to chat to you about your experience through depression, anxiety. I have a similar experience. I just wanted to sort of discuss that because in your book, when you're thinking about rethinking happiness, I'm interested to see what the journey was for you, where you found yourself in having depressive episodes, being in depression, and then finding a route to happiness. It'd be interesting to see if it's similar to mine, actually. So maybe you could talk to that for a moment for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that more people are talking about things like depression and mental health, because when I was experiencing this, there was a lot of stigma and shame. And I was I literally thought, well, if people knew what was going on in my brain, I might be institutionalized. I was so worried about it because I had no understanding of basically what good mental health was. And I didn't understand anything about psychology. But for me, I was living in Canada. My brother and I had built a really fun business. We had a microbrewery, and it was doing well, and I had a lot of friends. My life from the outside was great, but I was really unhappy when I get home to my apartment by myself, and I think that's a big distinction. If you have a tragedy in your life, you're going through a divorce, or you lose your job, or there's a death in the family, it's normal to feel a level of depression. But I think from having talked to you before, the outside world looks great, but then you're still unhappy. That's a signal from within saying, something's not right here, something needs to be addressed. And so I actually heard a public service announcement on the radio that said, if you're feeling these symptoms, you may be suffering from depression. And I said, wow, there's a name for how I'm feeling. And so that was kind of the first push. And so the first thing I thought, well, if something's wrong with my brain, I'm going to go to hypnotherapy to try and get it fixed. I thought it was a failed mechanism in my brain. And then, but through I did go to a hypnotherapist. He actually recommended a meditation teacher. And then I had lower chronic back pain, and I as a last resort, I started going to yoga, which was really great. And at the end, we meditated. So that led me then to go realize, okay, there are other forms of meditation. There are other forms of therapy. I started going to different types of talk therapy, even regression therapy. And all of that made me realize that the most significant thing I could do to change was to change my beliefs and my habitual ways of thinking. And so I had a number of different things that kind of all led up to this. But and once I got on the right track, I started to meet the right people and got referrals and so on. And so it was a long process, and it was not this steady climb upwards. It was more of a roller coaster. I'd have good days, and then I'd have a down day, and then I had, so I think it was persistence and perseverance. And whenever I had a good day, I started taking more action and started building on what I had done before. But I was at a point where I didn't know if I wanted to continue on with my life. I just thought, my thoughts about myself were so negative, and so such a sense of worthlessness and like being a fraud and being ashamed because, I had no reason to be unhappy. I really had no reason. And so, through therapy, I dug into a lot of stuff from my childhood and stuff. So I was able to, let go of the past and kind of get into a new mindset. So that's kind of, I got to a point where I realized, okay, I need to change my environment. Because that would really help me make a shift. And that's when my brother and we also sold the business, and I traveled backpack through Asia. That really changed my mindset. That really, opened my mind in a lot of ways. And then I completely changed culture. I moved to Europe. To Europe, to Germany, and started a new life here. Got into the corporate world, started learning a lot of new things and recognizing my potential in a whole new way. But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't addressed sort of the underlying reasons for why I kept having all these depressive episodes, even though outside my life seemed great and people were, I had all kinds of, people confirming that, I was good at what I did and so on. And I never believed it, And so a lot of it was just the fundamental beliefs that I had about myself were not letting any of that stuff through. I wasn't even looking at the, at the evidence. I was just kind of stuck in old ways of believing. And the other thing I did a ton of reading, right? There's a ton of self-help that I did, and that changed my whole perspective, the way I saw the world and the way I saw myself. So, I'm kind of throwing a lot at you, but that was kind of the way it all unfolded for me.
How long was that period in your life? How long did that go on for?
Well, depression for me started through therapy. We identified my first depressive episode at 7 years old in grade 2. And so I once I understood what it was, I could recognize the pattern through periods of my life as a teenager and into my early 20s. And it caused me to be impulsive and have erratic behavior and do things that were not good for myself, for me. And caused me to have very dysfunctional relationships, and so on. And then it really peaked at a point where, here I am, have my own business. I've achieved all these things I dreamt of doing, and yet I'm still not happy. And that's when that's where I could relate to. And I can't speak for people who are celebrities, because obviously I didn't have that level of success. But when you see people who are famous and rich and have done all the things they dreamt of doing, and then they take their own lives, I think it must be getting to a point where you've achieved everything you wanted to achieve and you're still not happy. How hopeless can that situation be, right? So I think that's kind of where I got to in my life, and so it was in my early 30s when I started really changing a lot of the ways I believed and the way I thought habitually and the way I looked at the world, and that changed my life completely. But I couldn't do it by myself. I needed help from others. And new habits that I started meditating. I exercised more regularly. I started coaching basketball. I played basketball in high school. I started, all these things that I was reading from self-help books. For those kids that would listen, I was passing it on. And so all of that led to me, improving my life.
So interesting. I feel sorry for you that you've had to go through that. I feel sorry for myself that I had to go through it as well. But here's a reflective point on it, and I wonder what your perspective might be on this. The depression that you went through, did it in some way, now you can reflect, it's horrible going through it. I know it's, obviously, especially because you felt like, that there were points where you think, is my life worthwhile here? But now you reflect on it because it gave you a new course of life. Do you feel like it served you in some way?
Absolutely. I don't regret any, and I'm not proud of a lot of the things that I did in my past when I was in that state, but I wouldn't change anything. I don't think I would have the capacity now to, it's the struggles and the challenges we go through that create who we are. And having been able to overcome that, I now feel confident I can overcome anything in my life, because I was at a point where I was ready to completely give up, and I found a way to work through it. And now, for me, I feel that's the gift that I can hopefully pass on to others to help them overcome their own challenges, whether they be mental health or not recognizing their own potential. So I don't regret any of it. I think it's made me who I am, and I'm happy with who I am now. So
love that. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions around that, because I'm coming to a belief recently when I've reflected back on my depressive time. For me, it lasted for about 3 years, but I think I've had moments in or out throughout my life, really. But I had a really difficult patch. It's about 5 years ago now, but it lasted for about 3 years. But now I'm beginning to believe it served me, because it's taken me on a new path, or the path that I believe I'm actually supposed to be taking. So where I'm trying to get to, so I believe this. So this belief that I have is something to do with your intuition, something in your gut, in your belly,
Yes.
that kind of. I had someone describing depression as deep rest, which is your body. Your mind, I'm trying to explain this, but it's a hard topic to explain. Your mind overrides a lot of your thoughts and gives you negative thinking. But I believe somewhere in your soul, in your body, there's an inner being, but way above, maybe it's in your subconscious somewhere, that knows what's right for you. And therefore, the depression, so if anyone's going through depression right now, I hope this will help. It's almost a way of deep rest to redirect you to what's the right direction for you in your life. That's what I've come to believe, but it was really hard to believe that at the time. But for you, it sent you on a new course of your life. It's also learned you some self-care habits, and now you're helping other people achieve their potential. So for humanity, there's a bigger positive there for you to have experienced that pain. What can you give some context to that?
I definitely think so, and I think there are two components. I think the deep rest one is a really good. I think it points to something really important. The same thing when we get sick and we were bedridden. Like it's the body needs rest. It needs something. And the thing is, what often the change that we need in our life. When we get sick, maybe it's a lifestyle or a diet thing. But when we're struggling with mental illness and we let it climax, a lot of times we're not willing to change until we face a crisis. And so, it's up to us if we want to change when we start to get those first signals, or if we want to wait until it gets really dire. And so I kind of relate it to, if someone's trying to get through to you and they're speaking to you in a normal tone of voice, but eventually they get frustrated and they elevate they get louder and louder until they're screaming at you. For me, that was depression. There was this inner voice, as you say, this intuition that was coming through that something wasn't quite right. And I kept suppressing it, kept ignoring it. It would flare up once and again. I'd find a distraction or a way to deal with it. I kept suppressing it until it got to a point where there was just no ignoring it anymore. There was that voice that was determined to get through. And it was almost like someone who was determined to get hold of me started screaming at me, right? And so that's kind of the metaphor I would use for it. It's the when your inner voice is not heard, it'll make itself heard in some way, and it'll be, whether it's some kind of you'll feel it from a mental health perspective, or you'll have some kind of physical breakdown or burnout or whatever. So that's why it's so important to listen to your inner signals. We have, whether it's, our thoughts are very valuable to us. They help us in the moment, logically think through problems. But we really undervalue what we feel, and I think our feelings. We can have negative thoughts, and they will generate negative feelings. But when you go beyond the thinking part of it, the emotions that we have, the feelings that we have are communication. So if you stub your toe and you feel that pain, that's communication. Something's not quite right physically. But when you feel something emotionally that you don't have any physical connection to, what's the message that's behind that? And I think that's an important thing to be aware of and to reflect on, because that will point you in the right direction.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the thing that I've learned about it, so I love how you articulated it there, because it's things that going on in my mind that I'm trying to still rationalize from when I was in depression, and also what's the outcome from it. All I could find was just trying to find a way through. So I think this will be, so if anyone is struggling, or they are having some mental health challenges, or they are in depression right now, I think that the takeaway here is, it's because there's something else for you in your life. And that's why it's happening, because maybe you're not living your most authentic self, or you're in a job which you can do better somewhere else, or there's this other thing for you, but you suppressed. And I think suppressing is the really big point there, because as men, what we're really good at doing is just suppressing our feelings, ignoring our feelings. And then you're right, it becomes like this scream at you, which is it's constant, it's shouting at you all the time. If you were to put your hand on the stove, that's a good indication of pain, right? Out, it hurts, you stop and take it off. But so pain is a good thing for us to have pain, because then we can recognize when it's going to be a problem. But when it's internal, we have a way of just going, it's okay, we'll just move on, we'll suppress, we drink alcohol, suppress, whatever way we're going to, we'll just get through it because we're strong. But actually what we're missing is this really important internal dialogue to send us in the right path for our life. But sometimes we have these limiting beliefs that we can't get there. And this thing is incredibly fascinating as a subject. So I think anyone who's struggling with depression right now, just take some time to journal, write it down, or go for a walk and think, what's this actually telling me? Because it probably means there's something greater for you, which you're probably not capitalizing on at this point.
And I would encourage people I would remind them they don't have to go through it on their own. I think it's really difficult to work through this stuff because, it's kind of not seeing the forest for the trees, because when you're immersed in your own thoughts, it's hard. I still go, when I am trying to work through something, I'll go to a coaching colleague and we'll talk through things. And I think if you're struggling with depression, find a mental health professional who can help talk you through it, at least through the worst of it. And then you'll find the right things and habits to do after. But I don't think I don't think you need to do it by yourself. And some people will go to a close friend, but your friends will just confirm the things that they think you want to hear. You need someone neutral who can help you sort through your own thoughts and feelings. And I think that's just a really important point I think we should add.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I saw a number of different therapists with different types of approaches. So I just recommend just talking. So I tried talking therapies. I also tried some RTT, the risk pair type hypnotherapy, and that was really beneficial. But in the end, it was actually a combination of all of the things. It wasn't just one. And you slowly came out of it as I started becoming more honest with myself and actually the things that I do want in my life. And I think that's why I believe it happens. And that's why I just feel like there's actually an internal wisdom almost that says you're meant for more. There's this other thing that you want. And that's there for you.
Yeah. And I think that's what I point towards when I talk about spirituality. People don't like to talk about that because maybe they're not religious and they think it's automatically a religious thing. I think that understanding sort of your inner emotional state, that is a spiritual practice. And it doesn't need to be, you don't need to go to a church or to a temple or whatever. You can if that helps you. But, I think that for me is what I called it my own spiritual journey. Right.
Yeah, it's following your soul. That's the
Yeah.
word we like to use. It's not
Yeah.
spiritual necessarily as a religion,
Exactly.
but I definitely feel far more, since going through this process, now I meditate, far more spiritual as a person. But I'd say it's more about being connected to your soul. That's
Yeah.
you know, far
Yeah.
more greater, I suppose, almost. So Peter, thank you so much for the time today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. If someone's looking to rethink their happiness, how can they reach out, get in contact, engage with you if they're looking for some sort of support?
Sure. The easiest way is through my website. It's peterteuscher.com, and the last name is spelled Teuscher, peterteuscher.com. And I write a weekly blog on a wide variety of topics around motivation, potential, mental health, and that kind of stuff. And, I've got my book, Rethinking Happiness. The full title is Rethinking Happiness and the Beliefs That Guide You. And that's on Amazon or any of the other. I have an audiobook version as well if you're on Audible. So yeah, those are the best ways to get in touch or to find out more about my work.
Thank you so much for your time today, Peter. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me on. It's been great.